Could Collin Sexton be headed to the New York Knicks? Let's get into this. Collin Sexton was drafted 8th overall in the 2018 NBA draft to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Coming into the NBA, Collin Sexton was known as a guy who was an amazing scorer on the offensive end and just had a great motor, always played extremely hard every time he was out on the court. In college, he played for Alabama, and on that team, there was basically no other NBA players on that team. It was all Collin Sexton, and he showed great leadership by leading the team very effectively and getting them all the way to the tournament and playing well. And eventually, when Collin Sexton moved on and got drafted by the Cavs, his scoring ability from college translated pretty effectively to the NBA, and he was still able to give buckets to whoever was defending him. But there were some deficiencies in his game. Just like any other player in the NBA, no player is perfect, of course, and Collin Sexton is no different. But as I said, he's a great scorer, but the issue with Collin Sexton has always been throughout his career is he wasn't passing the ball enough. And actually, in his rookie season, a lot of his teammates actually complained about it, which is a pretty bad sign coming from your older teammates, your veterans. If they're complaining about you not passing the ball to the media, that's a pretty bad sign. And over time, Collin Sexton kind of improved his passing ability, but still to this point in his 3rd or 4th season that he's in, he's still not necessarily a great passer or even a good passer at this point. He's just serviceable or a little under serviceable, so he really has to work on that going forward. But you may ask the question, why does it really matter if Collin Sexton's a great passer or not? If he's scoring buckets, he's still helping his team out in that sense, which my response would be and rebuttal would be, that's true, definitely when Collin Sexton is on fire and just getting buckets. Obviously, it doesn't matter that much if he's able to pass the ball effectively or efficiently or not. But the issue is, like any other scorer in the league, they also have off days. When Collin Sexton is not scoring the ball well, a lot of times what he tends to do is just chuck up shots and be super inefficient when he's just off on those days, and that really negatively affects his team, and most likely they're going to lose that game. But if he was able to pass the ball at least decently when he realized he was off, just get the ball to your teammates, let them do work, get the ball to your teammates in open spots and make them either hit those wide open threes or get all the way to the basket for easy layups or dunks. That's what the point guard of the team really should be doing. And yeah, when you look around the league, there's definitely scoring guards around the league that aren't necessarily great passers, and that's the new NBA. But even if they're not necessarily a great passer, they're at least a decent passer, and that's something Collin Sexton needs to improve. But to Collin Sexton's credit, I will say and give him credit for, he has improved as the years went on. So that's good to see from Collin Sexton. But moving on to present day, there have been a lot of reports that Collin Sexton could be headed to the New York Knicks, as the Knicks have a lot of interest to trading for Collin Sexton, and there's already been a trade offer out there. The trade offer out there is Kevin Knox, Obi Toppin, and one of the Knicks' first-round picks this season. But before we get into if this would be a good trade, let's see how Collin Sexton fits with this New York Knicks team. So finally, the New York Knicks were finally able to pull themselves together and put a little bit of a good team ahead of them, with all young players and a good coaching staff and a really good front office. Everything seems to be aligning for them. So now the next step is to acquire talent and build around RJ Barrett and Julius Randle. For years now, the Knicks' biggest need and biggest issue was the point guard position. They never had a guy who's a young guy that could really lead them at that point guard spot, get everybody the ball, calm everyone down, score the basketball at that point guard position. They never really had a great guy at that position, and it was very apparent last season. They had Derrick Rose coming off the bench, and in the playoffs he had to start because he was so effective and Elfrid Payton was so bad. But the issue with Derrick Rose is I don't think you can necessarily start him. I think he's at a stage of his career. He's great coming off the bench. He's a great scorer. He's also a pretty underrated passer. I want to give him some credit for that. But at this point, I don't think he's a guy who you can really start. I think you need somebody else to bring him in. And I think we've seen how bad Elfrid Payton was last season, and he still started throughout the entire season. I think what that tells you is the Knicks, first, they just didn't have a point guard on the roster, but that really tells you all you need to know about Derrick Rose and him not being able to play that many minutes, although D Rose played very effective in the minutes that he was given. So when you just look on paper and you talk about a guy like Collin Sexton, he's a very young player, of course. You're most likely going to sign him to a long-term contract, which would help you out in the future and years going forward. You have that position locked up, and he's an absolute bucket. This previous season, he was putting up over 24 points per game on 47% shooting from the field, which is incredibly high, and also 37% from three, which is something he struggled with in the past. So he's obviously an absolute bucket. So I think from that perspective, as a guy who's just an absolute bucket at that point guard position, I think that's exactly what the Knicks need, and he fits in greatly in terms of that. But as I mentioned before in the video, Sexton Sexton struggled with the ability to pass. He wasn't a great passer, he just wasn't passing the ball in general and kind of refused to and was chucking up shots at times, which really hurts you when Collin Sexton is completely off that night and just shooting terribly. So you're shooting a terrible percentage, you're not passing the ball, you're not getting easy shots for your teammates, you're not making your teammates better, and that's exactly what you should be doing at that point guard position. So that's something to look at when you make a potential deal for Collin Sexton, because it's not only the players that you're giving up, but you're also, if you're going to trade for Collin Sexton, you're going to sign him to a long-term deal. So that's something you have to make sure that you're very confident in going forward, that Collin Sexton could improve on his passing ability. And I mentioned it earlier in the video, he has been improving a little bit, not crazy amount, but he has been improving a little bit in terms of his passing ability, which is good to see. And in the past, I definitely had a very negative view of Collin Sexton because he was always being a bucket throughout his career and putting up pretty good numbers, but he was also had that issue about not passing, and from that point guard position, I typically like to see my point guard being able to pass the ball and get the ball to teammates in wide open spots and just make your teammates better. So when I saw those reports that he wasn't passing whatsoever, I really had a negative view of him. But I will say I have been more of a fan of Collin Sexton the more I've watched him, because he's been an absolute bucket and he's been very efficient this past season. I think this past season was really a breakout season for Sexton. He was always putting up those numbers, but last season he was just super efficient. The numbers that I mentioned to you before, 47% from the field, 37% from deep, those are crazy efficient numbers, and that's a great thing to see from Collin Sexton. So if you're on the Knicks and you're looking to trade for this guy, I think you could see Collin Sexton is in that upward trajectory, and you would think putting him in a better situation with the New York Knicks under a better coaching staff, better players around him, you would think potentially that he would continue on that trajectory and maybe even get on a better trajectory and just continue to improve. So overall, I listed the positives and negatives of Collin Sexton. Overall, do I personally think the Knicks should go after this guy and trade for him? I think you should take the chance, especially based on the trade package that was offered. If you can get Collin Sexton for Obi Toppin, Kevin Knox, and a first-round pick, I would definitely do that in a second. If I could edit that trade, I would potentially take Obi Toppin out and put in Frank Ntilikina and maybe another player, and also add another first-round pick. I'd personally rather do that rather than giving away Obi Toppin, because I kind of like the way Obi was playing later on in the season, and especially how he was playing in the playoffs. I think he has a decent amount of potential. But if you're able to do a trade like that, or even honestly the original trade for a guy like Collin Sexton, who could potentially be that franchise point guard that you've been needing for years now, I think you have to make that move. But overall, I'm still a little iffy about it, but I think based on the trade offer, it's something that I would definitely take the risk on. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think the Knicks should make this deal for Collin Sexton, or do you think the Knicks should look for a different point guard to add in the offseason? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, please hit that like button and subscribe and hit that post notification bell. It really helps me out a lot. Until the next time, peace out, guys.